in divorce, you have divorce brain, and it can be really hard to focus. And so surrounding yourself and having a lot of good self-care, surrounding yourself with people who can ground you and keep you present so that you can make decisions that you can really live with day to day long after people leave our care as professionals. They have to live with the agreements that they've made and the way that they have brought themselves to the divorce. I was in a collaborative divorce. And so staying out of court is always my number one piece of advice to people, because being in the court system does you no good. And so for me, staying out and having the ability to be in control and really working with my child's other parent, who we have a great relationship, to keep the kids front and center. Because if they're good, I'm good.
I'm Rachel Green, divorce mediator and collaborative attorney. Join me as I chat about everything from smoothly navigating your way through divorce to prenups, all the while keeping the kids in mind. Hi, and welcome to Keep the Kids in Mind. We are very lucky today to have Nora Marcus joining us. Nora is a licensed social worker, therapist, and consultant specializing in divorce, co-parenting, and family transitions. Nora, welcome.
Thank you so much. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm very happy to have you as my guest. So, what has drawn you to this work of families going through transitions?
Well, I've been a social worker for a long time, but this specific area, my personal life brought me to. I am somebody who has walked through divorce. I'm a single mom of two wonderful little boys who are 8 and 11. I don't think they would want me to call them little, so I'll call them medium boys who are.
That's right.
And through my own lived experience and getting to see what other families do go through and the real need for support and how that support makes such a difference in long-term outcomes, I really decided in a post-divorce landscape for myself to refocus my career to be able to help other families and really to be an advocate for children process, right? Because so often in divorce and in family transitions, children's voices or needs can unfortunately get lost. And so I want to make sure they have a place at the table, even when they're not there.
Even when they're not at the table, that their
Mhm.
interests and
Yeah.
feelings are being taken into account.
Yes.
I guess I have the same feeling of the importance of that, because that's why the podcast is called Keep the Kids in Mind.
Right.
Because I do find that's like one of the things that really drives me in this work is wanting to help parents help the children through the transitions.
Yes. Yes.
Um,
And it's hard work, but it's such worthy work to do for the people and for the professionals, right? For the people going through it, to be able to dig deep. Because I always say to people, the decisions that you make today will affect your long-term adult relationships with your children. It's not just right now, it's a long game,
yeah, yeah,
lifetime game.
that is true. And I mean, that's so, moving that your own experience, like that you've walked the walk. You're not just talking the talk, that you've
Yeah.
gone through this yourself.
Yes.
And like, what were some of the things that you feel like, worked well in your divorce or didn't work so well?
I think that what I've really learned is that though there are similarities in everybody's divorce, right? Things that we go through, emotions that we go through, that everybody's family is so unique and what they need. For me, having support and being able to refocus every time I felt emotional and overwhelmed. I think in divorce, now working on the other side of it, I can say that, when you're in divorce, you have divorce brain and it can be really hard to focus. And so surrounding yourself and having a lot of good self-care, surrounding yourself with people who can ground you and keep you present so that you can make decisions that you can really live with day to day, long after people leave our care as professionals. They have to live with the agreements that they've made and the way that they have brought themselves to the divorce, right? I was in a collaborative divorce. And so staying out of court is always my number one piece of advice to people because being in the court system does you no good. And so for me, staying out and having the ability to be in control and really working with my child's other parent, who we have a great relationship, to keep the kids front and center. Because if they're good, I'm good. When they're struggling, I'm struggling. I think any parent out there can certainly relate that when our kids are having a hard time, we're having a hard time too. Uh,
Yeah, they say that you're only as happy as your unhappiest kid.
it is the truth for
Mhm.
sure. And
Mm.
I think that as we're parenting, you still have to keep parenting your kids long after all the ink has dried on all the papers that you sign in a divorce. You still have to wake up every day in your life. What do
Right.
we want that life to look like? Well, that life gets created while you're in your divorce process, right? You're starting to create your life after, right? The decisions you make, the way you treat your soon to be ex-spouse, um, it really does make a difference.
Yeah. Wow, I have 3 or 4 questions that just are in my head at once. How are your children doing? Do you
My
think
children
you
are
did this, the right way? Like,
yeah, I really feel proud of all the decisions that we made. I don't think anything right, just like life isn't perfect, but
what?
can you believe it? So shocking. Um, I look at my kids and I see the beautiful resilience in them, but I know that that resilience was fostered by the decisions that we made. Children are resilient, but at what cost, right? So when we make decisions where their needs are not front and center, we're asking just sometimes, I think, too much of children, right? And so I look at them and I also hear feedback from other people, whether it be teachers or professionals. Gosh, your kids seem great. And that doesn't mean that there aren't hard days, right? Because my mentor, who I learned from, really talked about how divorce is not a singular event, it's a lifetime event. And so as children develop and they grow, they're going to come up and ask more complicated questions. And we have to be able to meet them where they are. And that can often be kind of loaded as parents when you're divorced because you're realizing your kids are carrying something. But I think that being able to get out of our own way as adults and really imagine what it's like for the kids is always the way to get to the best choices.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if you've read any of, Rosalind Sadaka's blogs or anything.
Yeah.
I love her. I love her work. And, she always says, like, listening to your kids is the number one gift you can give to them
Mhm.
while they're going through this. Like, to just say,
Yes.
"How are you?" And, like, get down to eye level with them and just shut up.
Yes.
The
Yeah,
question and shut up, right?
1,000%. Yeah, I agree fully. I mean, I think as humans, our greatest desire is to
It's
be
to
seen
be
and
heard.
heard,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And our kids are people too. I always
What?
tell my clients that. I'm like, "They're people, like, they're
Saying
just
all these
similar to
shocking things.
unbelievable." And so often when we're going, 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 or we're in divorce and we are just in survival mode, it can be very hard to pause, I think, and really look at your kids and notice them. Put your phones down and be present with them, so that they can get what they need. Because if you're actively listening, they will tell you all the things that are both easy and hard to hear.
Mm, mhm. And even, 7 or 8-year-old can have very insightful
Oh, yeah.
opinions and observations about the life that they're living. It's kind of
Yes.
amazing.
Yes, I have an 8-year-old, like I said myself, and, he says all kinds of really insightful, really curious things, and they're our greatest teachers, I think, kids, right? So they will tell us if we've fallen off track. We just have to make sure we're listening, and they'll let us know. Yeah.
Yeah. The Child's Bill of Rights.
Yes.
I've had families that have posted it on the refrigerator, like
Mhm.
printed out and stick it up and said to the kids, if you see me violating any of these rules, this is your Bill of Rights. You tell
Yeah.
me.
What a
If
wonderful idea.
if I ask you to tell your other parent something and it makes you uncomfortable, you stop me. You say, hey, you're not supposed to ask me to be a messenger. It says right
Right,
here.
right. That's a great idea
Yeah.
to remind people because life does get in the way, right? I mean, just day-to-day stresses that people face, and it can be hard, but
Yeah.
those decisions, oh gosh, they really do
Yeah.
impact kids in such a positive way.
So, and there's a separated and divorcing list of where people
Mhm.
post questions and answers and give each other support. And somebody the other day posted this really great post about, the divorce process. And I thought of this when you said life isn't perfect,
Yeah,
because she said, no one's going to get 100% of the things they want.
that's right.
And if you can pick out the 3 to 5 things that are the most important to you, maybe you can get those and then be generous with the other things,
Yeah.
to your ex. And I loved that. I thought,
It's true, right? That, people say that we should take the F word out of divorce, fair, because nothing is fair. And to just really be able to center yourself on what your priorities are, right? The alignment of those priorities with the two people who are getting divorced. Hopefully they can come together. And even if there's things that you can't agree on, to be able to agree on the children's welfare and well-being and keeping things as smooth as possible for them. Uh, those are the things I think that feel the best afterwards, even though sometimes people will say they feel like concessions when I work with clients. Well, I feel like I'm giving something up. And I always say to people, language really matters because I don't like to use the word custody. I like to use the word parenting time. I encourage people to say things like, that's not my time with my children. That's my children's time with me. That's their time with mom or dad or mom,
right,
mom, dad, and dad, right?
right,
That's their time. We're not the owners of them.
right.
And
I'm,
so,
I'm, I feel very sensitive about that as well. It's like one of my pet peeves. And I hate when I read an agreement that says the father will have Joey, on Mondays and Tuesdays. The mother will have Joey on Wednesdays and Thursdays. Like, no, Joey will spend time with his father,
right.
and Joey will spend time with his mother.
Joey is not a possession. Joey is a
Right.
person.
Right.
Right. Joey has 2 homes and he's allowed to have an unencumbered relationship with both of his parents. And, you know, I just, I live it every day and I know what it, what it takes. But once, I think when you're in it, it's really hard to imagine life calming down or the kids adjusting and you adjusting. And I think that can be very hard to do in the moment, and I don't know what your experience is, but to imagine life after, I think it's one of the hardest things to navigate in divorce, to be out of the crisis of divorce, right?
Right.
And
I,
be
yeah.
afterwards.
I had a client once who said, that she was thinking, how will I feel in 5 months? How will I feel in
Mhm.
5 years? And
Yeah.
that's different than how she'll feel in 5 days.
Yeah.
And it's hard to, it's kind of hard to think that far ahead, but maybe it can be helpful.
Yeah.
Um, I'm just wondering if we could circle back to the idea of divorce brain that you
Mhm.
were talking about.
Yeah.
I know there's that old book called Crazy Time, and um, I certainly, about a divorce and how it makes you crazy, while you're going through it.
Mm.
Certainly have over the years I've seen former clients who are almost unrecognizable because it's 2 years later and they look so good and, like, relaxed and confident. I
Mhm.
didn't see any of that part of
Right.
during the
Who are
divorce.
you?
Frazzled, their hair was
Right.
all matted, they were, hadn't showered and,
Yep.
um, just the shock and the transition and the insecurity, and I guess that I'm answering my own question of what causes the divorce brain.
Yeah, it's very intense feeling, there's this laser focus. Somebody that I worked with would always say that being in divorce is like being chased by a lion, and all you can think about is the fact that you don't want to get eaten by the lion. And so, if you can imagine that sort of tunnel vision of being in survival mode, I think it's very hard to think in the long game, to imagine really that things will work out, and to be out, to be out of that immediate crisis of divorce, of restructuring your life, of being in transition. And look, people don't get married thinking they're going to get divorced. And so when it happens, uh, it's shocking. It's shocking. There's so much to manage. And I really believe that there is nothing in your life that your divorce doesn't touch. And so you're navigating in a whole new way, and you have to attend to your day-to-day tasks. It's not like you're getting divorced and everything goes away, right? You're navigating. You could be separating your homes and helping your kids. You could be moving. You're still going to work, and every day dinner still needs to get made. So having divorce brain, and seeking help, taking help when you need it, really, allowing people to step in, whether that's friends or families. Somebody said to me once, "Can I just send you pizza for dinner?" And I was like, at first I was like, "No, no, no, I'm fine." And I paused and I was like, "Okay, thank you." Right? I don't have the energy to make dinner tonight. And
And
those
what a
little
treat.
things
What a
take
good
the
friend.
yeah. Yeah, the kids were like, "Oh my gosh, pizza showed up." I was like, "Pizza showed up." Yeah, so
Pizza from the gods.
Yes, imagine that. Yeah, but divorce brain fades, right? But I do think it takes time for your
Mhm.
body and your brain to
Well,
sort of align.
I'm sure you've seen this as well, but typically there, not always, but very often one person has kind of ahead of the other as far
Yeah.
as it, having the idea of divorcing, thinking about
Mhm.
divorce.
Yeah.
Maybe one person has turned it over in their head for 2 or 3 years
Mhm.
even,
Yeah.
and the other person is like, pew,
Like
just,
being hit by a freight train. Yeah.
yeah, like just in shock.
Yeah.
And I mean, I like to analogize that to, we're in one vehicle. We can only go as fast as the slowest wheel,
Right.
and we're all riding together. So, that second person needs time to catch up because you can't make decisions about your future until you really see, oh, this is my future.
Right, right, right. And I think as a professional, listening to you, being able to pause, for the professionals in charge of holding space for the clients to say, we need to pause here, or we need to take a minute, or you're noticing that someone's having trouble, or that they're making decisions from emotion, which don't usually end well in a divorce process. That pausing to let everybody sort of come together. Uh, right? You want everybody to be present. And, for the person who might be feeling a little behind, I always try to remind them, you're exactly where you should be. Your process is yours, right? We're not going to measure it or analyze it. It's just yours, right? You have arrived here at a different time. And this information or this process is really difficult. It's okay to be where you are, right? We're going to get where we need to go.
Yeah,
Sometimes it just takes more time, or it's a little bit rockier, or sometimes people need to take a break, right? A few
right,
weeks if they
right.
need to. It's
And
like, "Okay,
that's
we're gonna regroup here." This is not.
time is really your friend, I think, if you can
Oh, yes.
buy time. And I think the court process doesn't allow people to have time. It really is pushing them, to just.
Yes.
But I think also an attorney, even when I'm a mediator, I'm still also an attorney. And there is, I mean, they're going through this for the first time, but I'm going through this for the, whatever, 4,000th time.
Right,
I've been doing this work a long time.
right.
And so there is sometimes I can notice a tendency myself to say, okay, let's talk about this. Okay, cross it off the list. Next, we'll talk about this. And I actually have a friend who's going through a divorce now, and
Mm,
she has said that it's like eye opening to be on the other side, and
right.
she really needs more time. She just needs more. She needs it to slow
Yeah,
down. She needs more time to process. She needs more time to sleep on things and, maybe have 2 or 3 weeks between mediation sessions and just not rush to the wrong finish line, as they say.
Right, right. Yeah, being actually in it and being tasked with decision making, even if you've sat on the other side of the table as a professional so many times, it's their first time, right? It's like an obstetrician delivering a baby,
Right.
it's your first baby. They've delivered thousands of babies, but the experience is new. And of course, divorce and loss, right? It's all there's so much happening and our brains are grieving at the same time, and it's really tough sometimes to focus, and knowing when to pause or clients having support, I just think it makes such a big difference so that they can make sure they're getting what they need outside of the room, whether they're at a collaborative table, at a mediation, hopefully not in court anywhere. I always say to people, you can be angry and still make really good decisions, and you can be sad and still make really good decisions, long-term decisions that are going to work out well. It's okay. You don't have, I would say your emotions are not a problem that needs solving.
Mm,
You can feel exactly how you feel
mhm.
and you can keep going
I love
and make
that.
decisions. You don't need to stop feeling how you feel.
Right,
It's impossible to tell somebody to not
right,
feel how they're feeling. You can still get through it, and do it really well.
right. So, what kind of support do you offer people who are going through divorce?
Yeah, so I like to say that I'm an
Separation?
advocate for children in all the work that I do. But one of my passion areas is helping people to write parenting plans. So I do a lot of parenting plan consultation. I do divorce coaching work. I'm also a therapist, so I see clients clinically and being able to help people, being a co-parenting specialist. So I'll see people during divorce and after divorce. Uh,
Work on parenting
To
issues,
work
yeah.
on parenting issues so that they don't go back to their attorneys or worst case end up in court. There is support available to help them. I'm a mediator, but I don't actively mediate. I'll do co-mediations, and come in when there's a lot of heart heavy work going on, right? To sort of help hold space for that, to get into the nitty gritty about the parenting plan. I know a lot of times people have parenting plans and I'll see them long after a divorce, and they're looking at their parenting plan and it's so not comprehensive. I like to think about a parenting plan as if it's, when you go bowling with little kids and they put the bumpers up. I feel like a lot of what goes into parenting plans are those bumpers, right? We can't predict everything that's going to happen, of course, because life is just going on, but we can have guardrails in place for people so they know how to handle certain situations. And when they don't, they know where to go for support if they can't agree on it, right? There's structure there so they don't fall in the gutter, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah. And what would you say are the kind of the biggest mistakes that you've seen people make or, the biggest pitfalls that you would help people to avoid or
Yeah, I think acting from anger and sadness is probably one of the biggest things, which is why I that's some of the work that I do with people, especially if they've hired me as a coach, is or if they're coming to see me in therapy, is working on the emotional part. Because when you come in, and if you're acting from anger, right, people might want to be hurting their soon to be ex-spouse, but they're really hurting their kids. They're really hurting their kids. And that, I believe, are decisions that people, even if they don't think they're going to regret it right in the present time, they will regret it later on. If you're acting in anger, that's where that pausing is such a gift, especially as a professional, right? If you're sitting in a mediation and you notice things are really going awry, that you're able to say, we're off track here. So I think acting in anger is one of the biggest pitfalls. It's like a danger zone, right? It's
yeah, so
quicksand.
can you say a little more about how that hurts children? Because I think that's counterintuitive, like, a parent might think, well, I'm doing it. I'm doing it to him. I'm going to squeeze every last penny
Mm,
I can out of him, and I don't care if if he's ending up sleeping on his cousin's couch. He cheated on me. He ruined this marriage.
right. So in that example, let's say you may be angry with your ex-spouse, could be for a myriad of reasons, or maybe nothing major has happened. However, your ex-spouse or soon to be ex-spouse is your child's other parent. And if their they their well-being and their welfare actually really does matter, even if you're super angry with them being good is of critical importance for your child, right? We want two healthy, stable, steady parents if we can. But when we're acting in anger, let's say, especially with time, when people are treating their kids like a commodity, I'm not going to let such and such, I'm not going to let my kids see their dad, or I'm not going to let my kids see mom. You are robbing your child of time with their other parent. And
That
that
goes
is,
back to what we were saying before, that it's not the parent, the mother will have the child, and then the father will have the child, or the mother and the mother,
Mhm.
but is if it's instead the child's time with parent one and parent two, you're robbing the child of that time as
Right?
opposed to robbing your ex.
Yeah. You are literally taking time from your child. And I always say to people, if your child asks you about this decision that you really want to make right now, when they're 30 years old and they look you in the eye and say, how come you didn't let me see mom or dad or whomever is with the child? What will you say? How will you answer that question? Why did you do that? Because you're
Well,
angry with them?
yeah.
Well, that's not a great reason.
Yeah, so you're saying at 30, the
Right,
child will say, "You didn't let me have a full relationship with
right.
my other parent."
Mhm. Right? And if
Well,
you could
that's
it's
true.
hard to imagine it, right? Your adult child, especially for little kids,
Yeah.
asking a question like that, but if they do, because they will, right? Maybe they're not gonna come to you, but maybe they're gonna go to their therapist or a friend or a future partner, and
Or
they're
your sister, or
realizing,
your brother, or your cousin, or your
yeah,
best friend,
yeah,
and
it's like,
say, "What
gosh,
was going through." Yeah.
you didn't let me see, or let's say there's something on a weekend you're supposed to, be with the kid or something. Gosh, well, there is place to be a little bit expansive if it's in the best interest of the child or children. And when we act from anger, or we act from sadness, or we act from scarcity, well, I'm afraid of what might happen, so I'm not going to do that, or I'm going to keep my kids back from that, or I'm not going to let my kids do whatever it is because I'm afraid. I'm afraid of loss. I'm afraid of life not being the way I pictured it. That is true. And I always say to people, and all caps, and many things are true at once. You can be really scared of your others, their child's other parent, taking them off to school, packing their lunches, and maybe they're not going to do things exactly the way you do it, but that doesn't mean that they're going to do it wrong. Giving them a chance, right? You have to give your child a chance too, your children a chance to have an unencumbered relationship with both their parents.
Well, and the other thing is that if the other parent does it wrong, the child will correct them.
Yes, they do not hesitate, children, to correct, and they're counting on you to show up for them. And part of showing up for your kids is prioritizing their needs.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing.
Well, you have so much perspective and wisdom to impart. It's really fun to talk to you about this. What do you think is, the biggest factor that drives people to the court system, if you have any opinion about that? Or I'm just wondering, like, what you've seen in families you've worked with, because
Yeah.
I mean, litigation is ritualized war, basically. That's
Yeah.
society came up with the system of our courts because
Yes.
people used to just duel, and
Mhm.
one of them would die.
Right. Right.
And and so we said, all right, let's think of a better way to resolve disputes. And then they came up with the court system. And certainly when you think of it in the context of a family, I would think, your child is not going to thank you for killing their parent, right?
Right.
So it just seems to me like that's a whole inappropriate analogy. And yet
Right.
there are some couples that just I'm working with one couple right now. It's very high conflict, and every 20 minutes one of them threatens the same one. Just says, that's it, we're gonna have to go to court.
Right.
Well, I'll just go to court. And I think that people also don't know what the court system really is going to be like. They have
No clue.
fantasies that the judge is going to be the kind, understanding father that I never had. Well,
Right.
that won't happen.
No, it will not
They
happen.
won't even have time to talk to the judge.
Right. Justice will not be served, right, in the court system. I mean, I really think what you're saying right now about when people are threatening, that's it right there. It's the fear, right? It's fear, and it's anger. These big, red, hot, intense emotions. Well, if you don't do this, I'm going to go to court because I believe justice will be served there and the judge is going to right this wrong. I listened to a judge speak once when I did my collaborative training who stepped off the bench, and he spoke really beautifully about how court systems were not set up for families. They just weren't. They're not made to house family issues, right? The courts are really more made for land disputes and finances.
Yeah.
They weren't made to navigate how do we help young children when their family is restructuring into two homes. I mean, that's not something that they can do. And if you listen to any judge who has 300 cases on their docket, right, they could be the nicest person ever, but they don't have the ability to sit and go through everything and talk about it and figure out what's going to be best for your family. And I think when people do that, those threats, they're acting from fear, they're acting from anger, and they think that's going to solve the problem, when in actuality, they're probably going to get a worse outcome, or they could end up with the same exact thing that they had right in front of them in a mediation or in a collaborative setting. They just have no control once they go there. So I think it's those big, big emotions that lead them there. And I think that there is no way that anybody walks out of a litigation. And please tell me if you know anybody that's ever come out of a litigation and been like, I'm really glad I did that.
No, in fact, I asked a litigator that like 2 months ago at a continuing ed program. And I went up to her during a break and I said, has anybody ever been happy after litigation? And she burst out laughing. She said, absolutely not. They say, all the money I spent and this is the result. Because they have this fantasy that they're going to get 100% of what they want. And the judges most of the time have two reasonable people. I mean, reasonable, as far as like able to be parents, able to function. And the judge is going to give some things to you and some things to your ex. That's just human nature. They're gonna split the baby.
Right. And the judges can't take, you're in a court system, they're not going to take into account your individual children and your individual circumstances and being able to create a schedule that works for your family.
Yeah.
Right. There's blanket decisions that are going to get made. I worked with somebody who they were in court and litigation for so long, and the judge was like, please leave and you need to come back, because they'd been in and out, in and out, in and out for so long, and they couldn't make a certain decision. It was just not ending. And how is that even good for you, your own mental health? I mean, the level of stress that you're under.
Yeah. And I think conflict is addictive too. And like you just find yourself like walking down the block and thinking about it, all the time, even when you're not with your ex and you're not in conflict.
It swallows you whole. And
it swallows you whole. Yep.
Right there. So such an important thing is that we don't want to face the loss. People don't want to deal with the loss. And it's much easier to stay in the anger than it is to be right here and feeling what you're feeling. and experience the loss that goes along with going through a divorce. It's much harder to deal with that. It's easier to stay in the anger, and that's, I think, exactly what you're talking about, is that anger, that conflict is addictive. Well, if I stay laser focused on this, well, I don't have to deal with something else, and people aren't necessarily doing it consciously,
Mm.
but right, the human brain is so complicated and so smart, right? It's protecting us from things, but
Right, but anger is a secondary emotion, so there's always some hurt or
yes.
loss or, some way that your needs
Mhm.
weren't met,
Yes.
and what I'm hearing is you're saying it's much harder to sit with the pain,
Yeah.
rejection,
Yeah, just the
hurt,
hurt, even if it's a
right?
mutual decision, right? There are people who come to divorce because their marriage just isn't working for them anymore. They've grown apart, the marriage isn't salvageable for whatever the case may be. And those cases too, there's loss. So much loss, loss of the life that you imagined, loss of time with your children. It's big stuff. And it's why I always advocate for people to get support that they need outside of their lawyers. And look, lawyers offer so much. And I think people go to their lawyers for so much because there's a safety net there, but having a safe space to deal with the emotions so you can show up to your mediation, to your collaborative divorce in the way that you really want to really makes a difference. And it allows you to stay out of the anger, to stay out of the fear, and make more conscious decisions.
Yeah. Well, that certainly is the ideal.
That's the
So,
hope.
Nora, what are a couple of takeaways that you would want people to remember from this conversation?
I would want them to remember to pause and to be gentle with themselves in the course of a divorce, and gets the support that they need. And when in doubt, they should always think about what would be best for their
Those
kids.
kids.
Right? When you feel the things bubbling up, your own emotions, look at a picture of your kids, right? Really refocus on them.
And
Gosh,
think
how would
about
this look day to day for my kids?
right, and think about how they're gonna look back on it when they're 30.
Oh, yes. Yeah, if your 30-year-old is asking you, "Gosh, why didn't you let me see my other parent?" What will you say to them? Because that's a tough, right? These are tough questions to answer, and our children will not be children forever. They're gonna grow up and be adults with big adult questions.
Yes, it's true. Well, thank you so much. It's been lovely talking to you today, and we'll put your contact information in the show notes so that people can contact you. And I'm really glad that you're doing this work. We need your insights and your support
Mhm.
for
Thank you so much
helping
for having me.
families. Yes, take care.